안녕하세요. 매일매일 운동하기를 실천하고 있는 동탄 왕호입니다. 오늘 새로운 구독자가 왔나 모르겠습니다. 오늘 오전에 100명이었는데 지금 오후 5시인데 99명이에요. 누구야? 잡아냅니다. 구독 취소 누르면 잡아내요. 예? 운동해야 되는데 너무 피곤해요. 오늘은 비가 옵니다. 지금 밖에 비가 와요. 많이는 안 오고 구슬구슬 옵니다. 구슬구슬 와. 코로나 300명 넘게 나왔죠. 그리고 또 뭐 있나? 오늘 코로나 300명 넘게 나왔고 내일부터 1.5단계 시행이고 비가 오고 모르겠네요. 운동하기 싫어. 아, 운동하겠습니다.
Save by the Future this weekend on CNN in association with Hyundai.
After a major shake-up at the Defense Department, the Trump administration is now ordering a significant drawdown of troops in Iraq and Afghanistan. When it's done, just days before President-elect Joe Biden is sworn into office, about 2,500 troops will remain in each country. CNN, Sam Carney, live in Dubai with the details on this. So, Sam, it's official. Everyone sort of knew this was coming. It would seem there's greater concern for what this decision means for Afghanistan as opposed to Iraq.
맨날 싸워. 전쟁. 사람 죽이는 게
Well, I
그냥.
think, yes, I think that there has been a lot of
yes,
Pentagon memos, not least reportedly from the Washington Post from Mark Esper, prior to his dismissal by Donald Trump as the Secretary for Defense, arguing that the conditions were not yet right, a position that has been held, I know, from my own sources in Afghanistan by a number of NATO officers, for a precipitous US withdrawal. There are about 4,500 troops in Afghanistan, dropping that down to 2,000. A lot of military commanders there would argue, particularly so quickly by January 15th, the target date, could mean that the Taliban, who are currently in negotiation for peace deal with the central government, largely brokered by the United States, would get a big win without any kind of concessions on their side, because this troop withdrawal used to be tasked, or rather linked directly to Taliban's rejection and derecognition of Al-Qaeda. Now that isn't going to happen in the time frame that it would appear. The Americans under the Trump administration are now being ordered out prior to that concession. And meanwhile, of course, also in Iraq, the growth of Iranian-backed Shia militias, a growing influence there, growing levels of attacks, particularly in the south, but also we saw, nobody's claimed responsibility, but a lot of fingers will point at Shia militia for a recent rocket attack yesterday onto the green zone that houses the US embassy. In other words, John, both areas are still roiling. In both cases, there's certainly pressure from allies not to withdraw too soon, although obviously in Iraq, the US is under pressure officially from the central government following the killing of Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general, back in January this year. John?
Sam Carney, as always, thank you for that. Sam Carney live in Dubai. Appreciate it. US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is on a 7-country tour of Europe and the Middle East, possibly with an eye towards a presidential run or maybe his legacy. Earlier, Pompeo met with the president of the former Soviet Republic of Georgia. Pompeo's message there will be the importance of democratic process. And yes, he will deliver that with a straight face as President Trump denies the election results at home. Pompeo's next stop is Israel. That's where we find CNN's Oren Lieberman live in Jerusalem. You know, this is quite a unique trip for a US Secretary of State, heading out to the settlement, something that's never happened before.
It's never happened by any U.S. official and certainly never any Secretary of State. Unprecedented from any other Secretary of State in U.S. history. Perhaps not so much from Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Let's remember, it wasn't all that long ago that Pompeo ruled that settlements in the occupied West Bank and the Golan Heights are not de facto violations of international law, a decision which breaks with international resolutions, but certainly made the Trump administration happy, evangelical Christians happy, and the Israel's right-wing government. He's expected to visit the winery of Sagot, where there is a red wine named after him, as well as the settlement of Shiloh. That's our expectation at this time. Shiloh is significant because biblically, that's where the Ark of the Covenant rested before it was brought up to Jerusalem, meaning it's important not only, of course, to Jews, but also to evangelical Christians. And then he is also expected to visit a settlement in the Golan Heights. He could theoretically visit Trump Heights there, although right now, that is at the moment a sign without any buildings there to speak of. His visit begins this afternoon, where he'll meet with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Bahraini foreign minister here in trilateral meetings. John, it's also worth noting where he's headed after his visit here. Pompeo will head to Qatar and Saudi Arabia. Those are two countries that the Trump administration has been eyeing for normalization deals with Israel. So maybe those efforts still ongoing in the waning days of the administration.
Oren, just very quickly, explain the motivation here. Why is Pompeo making this visit to the settlement, and what has been the reaction from, I guess, from the Palestinians first up?
The Palestinians have been furious about this. To them and to the international community, settlements are a violation of international law, and a visit there legitimizes these in the eyes of Israelis and furthers the possibility of a two-state solution with a state of Israel next to a state of Palestine. That's why Palestinians are enraged by this. What's Pompeo thinking? Well, I think you nailed it right in the lead-in there. Pompeo's looking at 2024, where his base has always been. His support has always been from evangelical Christians. And that is who he's looking to in this visit. And to lend credence not only to President Donald Trump, but to the moves that the Trump administration has taken in the past. Namely, recognizing Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, moving the embassy, recognizing Israeli sovereignty in the Golan Heights. All of that in the waning days of the administration is to shore that up and at least send a signal to voters, perhaps 2024 voters, that Pompeo was serious and that this is Trump administration policy.
Oren, thank you. We appreciate that. Oren Liebman in Jerusalem. Thanks. Well, you're watching CNN Newsroom. The coronavirus continuing to surge in Europe, and now the first country there has passed 2 million cases. Also ahead, a new lockdown for the Australian state of South Australia, where authorities believe a cluster of new cases where they think it's coming from. That's next as well.
This year, CNN Heroes isn't just saluting everyday heroes, but the larger moments that defined the biggest stories of the year. Vote for this year's most inspiring moments at cnnheroes.com.
와, 배 지나고
I'm Anna Stewart in the city of London, and this is CNN.
France is the first European country to pass 2 million confirmed cases of the coronavirus. Government officials say the second wave of the virus is massive and deadly, placing the healthcare system under pressure. Well, France is in the midst of a 4-week-long lockdown. There are signs the rate of infection is slowing.
Nos efforts collectifs, our collective efforts are beginning to bear fruit. In recent days, the number of new cases has been dropping. Let's redouble our efforts to regain control of the epidemic. Efforts collectifs. All collective efforts, the respective curfews and national containment, explain this positive trend. It is by maintaining a very high level of vigilance and mobilization that we will be able to spend the end of the year festivities and the winter months in the best possible safety conditions.
German lawmakers have delayed new lockdown measures until next week. That's a rare defeat for Chancellor Angela Merkel, who's now urging the country to work together to bring the virus under control.
Wie ich es eben schon sagte, steigen derzeit.
Infection numbers aren't growing exponentially anymore, but are still far too high. So we have to reduce contacts, reduce contacts, reduce contacts.
Trotzdem, das weiß
I am fully aware that the measures to restrict all contacts are and remain a burden, a democratic burden, and they are among the toughest decisions I have made in office.
Sweden might just be moving away from its herd immunity approach, banning gatherings now of more than 8 people. The country has reported more than 15,000 new infections since Friday. The US has just issued emergency use authorization for the first COVID-19 self-testing kit that can provide rapid results at home. It does require a prescription, but allows users to swab themselves and collect a nasal sample. That sample is placed in a vial which plugs into the device, ultimately giving out the results. Well, the state of South Australia has announced a new 6-day lockdown starting midnight Thursday local time. The move is described as a circuit breaker after a small outbreak in the suburbs of the state capital, Adelaide. Only essential services like supermarkets and medical facilities will remain open. Live now to Angus Watson in Sydney for more on this. Yeah, this is pretty strict. It's like only one resident will be allowed out of each house, and they have a specific reason. And I guess they'll be enforcing this as well, right?
It is strict, John, but it's what the government there in Adelaide in South Australia believes is necessary to get on top of a cluster of coronavirus that they just don't know how large it could be. So 22 cases now make up the cluster, but the health authorities there fear that there may be many more cases out there. So what it's doing is it's set up what it's called a circuit breaker lockdown, where it's deciding to put everybody, essentially, into quarantine for 6 days. And what that's going to do is give health authorities the opportunity to try to get people tested and try to get on top of this before it gets out of control. The Premier of South Australia spoke earlier about the need to get the whole state behind this effort. Here's what he said.
This is about South Australia pausing so that we stay ahead of the virus. Our concern is that if we don't have this circuit breaker, that we will not stay ahead of this. There is no second chance to stop a second wave. We are at a critical point, but we will get through this.
So, John, this is an interesting one because we have a cluster of just 22 cases of coronavirus, yet we have an extremely swift and extremely serious and strict response from the government there, putting a whole state into quarantine just over 22 cases. That's very different to what we're seeing in the US and in Europe, John.
To say the least, it seems hit it hard and hit it quick is the way they're doing it in New Zealand and Australia, at least. Angus, thank you. Angus Watson there live in Sydney.
와, 터벅거렸어,
Destruction
터벅거렸어.
and desperation after 2 hurricanes slam Central America. When we come back, an update on the storm as well as relief efforts on the ground. Also, rising anger in Thailand. Pro-democracy protesters remain defiant. The very latest from Bangkok in a moment.
We've missed the globe-trotting and adventures. Now we're ready to get out and go.
This is living.
Uncovering the city's DNA. Meeting people who will share its secrets.
It's like uncovering treasure.
어, 진심 터벅거렸어, 진심.
Wow.
어,
Wanted to be a leaf peeper.
It's a world of wonder.
물도 마시고 오겠습니다.
Go and see it.
15분밖에.
On CNN in association with Turkish Airlines.
넘었을 것 같은데.
Coronavirus is affecting an entire country. the world. Are we ready?
In the beginning of outbreaks like this, nobody knows what's happening. We're determined to keep reporting the story.
That's not worried, because that seems to be what worries me now, because we're ready for it.
These are the moments where our humanity really does shine through. That's the hardest part.
It's heartbreaking.
Dr. Sanjay Gupta, CNN.
Hurricane Iota has killed at least 6 people in Nicaragua and left extensive devastation in its path. Tens of thousands of people are in government shelters, and Iota has been downgraded, but it's still causing catastrophic flash floods as it moves through Honduras. It's leaving behind a trail of uprooted trees, smashed homes, and swamped roads. Forecasters expect the storm to weaken and dissipate as it nears El Salvador on Wednesday. I spoke earlier to the award-winning chef Jose Aldre in Honduras about the World Central Kitchen relief efforts. He told me what the organisation has been doing there in Central America and around the world.
This year alone, in the last 7 months, World Central Kitchen alone, we've done close to already over 40 million meals. From explosions in Beirut to many hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico, in different American states. In Mexico itself, Yucatan, Quintana Roo, we see that this keeps happening. It's a need for organizations like ours to show up before these hurricanes hit, and we are ready to provide something like we should be able to provide, which is food and water. So at least this is one of the problems that people don't have to think about. Yes, the need keeps increasing. We are not expecting to be called. What we do is we show up. We are ready, we bring the private sector, we bring volunteers, and we're trying to make sure that big problems become actually solutions by bringing a plate of food at a time. Sometimes it's the beginning of hope of a better tomorrow.
In Thailand, pro-democracy protesters are vowing to take to the streets of Bangkok once again after the most violent clashes since this youth-led demonstrations began in July. Dozens were hurt. Thai police say 2 people were injured by live ammunition. They're investigating the source of that gunfire. Demonstrators converged on Parliament to pressure lawmakers as they consider changes to the Constitution. Channel 4's Jonathan Miller is in the Thai capital.
Tear gas hung heavy in the sultry tropical night. Jets of water cannon, laced with stinging chemicals, slicing through the choking plumes, driving protesters back before they'd advance again. Taunting riot police behind the razor wire and broken barricades with chants of slaves, you slaves of the dictatorship. Wave after wave of demonstrators, most without gas masks to protect them, surging up, washed back again, an angry human tide.
But if the government thought of permission to just tough this out and wait for it to go away, they're going to have to think again. They're running out of options here. But there is no hint, no sign at all of the compromise, which the king hinted at just 2 weeks ago.
This, the most violent night in 5 long months of protest. A pitched street battle outside Thailand's parliament, the home of what was once a messy but functioning democracy. As the foot soldiers rinsed off the steel irritants, Parliament was debating proposed amendments to a constitution written by the military.
결국에 모든 전 세계에서 결국에는 언젠가는 저 왕권이나 부정부패에 의한 정치가 사라지긴 하겠죠.
But without reform, these protests will not stop. And when the king told us 2 weeks ago that Thailand is the land of compromise, those raged against him scoffed.
영국도 그 왕이 있지만 뭐 딱히 그렇게 크게 영향이 없지만.
This is not land for compromise. This is not. Look at me now. This is not compromise. Look at that. Look at this. What they doing to us? It's not compromise. It's no mercy. This is no mercy for us. There's no mercy for the Thai people.
Earlier, pro-democracy protesters breached barricades near Parliament. Police vanished, allowing direct confrontation with the king's ultra-royalist yellow shirt supporters who'd come to demand the former junta's constitution remains untouched. King Maha Vajiralongkorn is exalted in this constitution as enthroned in a position of revered worship. But those clamouring for reform believe he's all too human, and tales of regal profligacy have embittered many ties left destitute by this pandemic. Fertile ground for heresy, rebellion. The Hunger Games salute remains the symbol of defiance here in this increasingly dystopian kingdom.
Well, finally, here a sports story. Osaka, Japan has a new high-tech helper to enforce social distancing. This is RoboVi, developed by Kyoto's Advanced Telecommunications Research Institute. As you can see, RoboVi approaches customers who are not wearing a mask. He asks them, put one on. Apparently it works that way. RoboVi can also measure the distance between shoppers, ask them to maintain a safe distance. The developers say this is a step towards making a society where people and robots can all coexist happily with one another. Thank you for watching. I'm John Paul. Stay with us. Rosemary Church has more CNN Newsroom at the top of the hour. In the meantime, here's World Sport.
Air quality update in association with Copernicus, Europe's eyes on Earth. Quality update in association with Copernicus, Europe's eyes on Earth.
Now is the time to show the world that the place is here. Indonesia, the center of events destination. As a proof that our nation will rise and be strong again.
Hi there, welcome to CNN World Sport this Wednesday as we begin with a result that has absolutely shocked the world of football to its very core. Listen to this, Spain 6, Germany 0, a humiliating scoreline for the four-time world champions. In fact, their heaviest competitive defeat ever. The Germans coming totally unstuck against an inspired Spanish team on Tuesday. This in UEFA Nations League group stage action. From the moment Alvaro Morata put the Spanish ahead there in Seville, you knew Germany would have their work cut out, and so it would prove. Spain second, coming from Man City youngster Ferran Torres. who will surely never forget this occasion. He would go on to get his first career hat-trick. The Germans distraught and in complete disbelief, completely outplayed. There was the hat-trick goal there. They were devoid of ideas, the Germans. Rodri and Mikel Oyarzabal were the other scorers for Spain. I'll say it again. Spain 6, Germany 0. They're in shock. The German players struggling to compute what they see here. And now huge pressure, you would imagine, on their head coach, Joachim Löw. Really a result that has sent shockwaves right through the world of football. Those players will take a long time to get over that, I'm quite sure. All right, now, prior to Tuesday, their only 5-goal defeat had come at the 1954 World Cup, when then West Germany were thrashed 8-3 by the outstanding Hungary team. That in the group stages, but West Germany, well, incredibly, they went on to win the tournament that year, beating Hungary in the final. They've lost 6-0 before, though, in a non-competitive fixture, losing heavily to Austria in 1931. I tell you what, it's all a far cry, isn't it, from the 2014 World Cup in Brazil, when Germany inflicted a 7-1 semi-final defeat on the host nation. Credit Spain, though. They were magnificent, weren't they? The Spanish now through to the 4-team Nations League finals next year. Germany knew even a draw would have seen them through to the last 4. Meantime, the group's other game between the Ukraine and Switzerland, that one was called off after a number of Ukrainian players testing positive for coronavirus. Like Spain, France also through. Les Bleus had already qualified, but still a welcome win over the Swedes in Paris Tuesday night. Olivier Giroud, the Chelsea star, stepping up to the plate big time for his country again after the Swedes had taken the lead in this one. Giroud levelling for the hosts in the 16th minute, and he would add another just shy of the hour mark. The world champions win it 4-2. Giroud edging closer now to Thierry Henry's all-time goals record for the French. Giroud now up to 44 for his country, 7 behind Henry's record. Sweden relegated to League B. Portugal, the first ever winners of the Nations League, meantime leaving it late before beating 10-man Croatia in Split. This a 5-goal thriller, the game. Atletico star João Felix bundling the ball home there. Was it a handball, though, in the build-up, they ask? Well, that made it 2-1 Portugal just before the hour mark. Croatia levelling, though, minutes later for 2-2. Mateo Kovacic with his second for the 2018 World Cup finalists in that match. But a minute or so later, look at this, a keeper clanger. Ruben Diaz taking full advantage, 3-2 Portugal. Cristiano Ronaldo did play, by the way, but did not score. Now, I want to get to South America. The road to World Cup Qatar 2022 already in full swing, with 5-time world champions Brazil travelling to Montevideo to face Uruguay, a match that did not feature Luis Suarez for the Uruguayans after the Atletico star player's recent positive test for COVID-19. Brazil's impressive form continuing, though, with a superb 2-0 victory over their hosts. The opener from the Juventus midfielder Arthur in that one. And before the half was up, Everton's Richarlison doubling the Brazilians' advantage. That's 4 wins out of 4 now for Brazil. To make matters worse for Uruguay, Manchester United, the Edinson Cavani seeing red midway through the second half. 2-0 the final. Brazil topping the 10 nations
마지막
standings
20개만
by 2
하겠습니다.
points from
한국
Argentina,
편이.
who beat Peru 2-0 in Lima. Now later in the show,
저 앵커 아저씨 겁나
in the Africa Cup of Nations.
악마처럼 했는데 영화에 나오는
The
살인범.
early part of
미안합니다,
2022
앵커
due to
아저씨.
the ongoing global pandemic, so stay with us for that.
20개만 하고
The now with the
끝내겠습니다.
elites from the world of men's tennis doing battle in the season-ending ATP finals. Tuesday bringing with it a sensational match between US Open champ Dominic Thiem and the reigning French Open champion Rafa Nadal. On this occasion, it would be the Austrian star emerging victorious. It was a thriller, though. Both sets going to tiebreakers. An absolutely enthralling contest. No fans, for the record, inside the famed O2 Arena there to witness these two superstars serving up a right classic. Matches at this event being played behind closed doors due to the pandemic. The first set alone lasting well over the hour mark, with Rafa squandering 2 set points in it. Thiem taking full advantage, though, in the end to seal the win and advance to the tournament's last 4.